Hey guys, I'm Soumya. Welcome back to the Digital Designer Show, along with my co-host Sivam.
Hello, guys. Welcome back to our show, The Digital Designer Show. Myself, Shivam. And once Picasso said, every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up. And how can I forget once my aunt said, simplicity is soul of beauty. So today we have a very special guest with us. Extreme simple with very beautiful soul and great did. She completed her medical studies from Chennai, Tamil Nadu, shifted to UK, completed her MRCP. She works for NHS Health Service of UK and practice pediatrician. And she is extreme loving, down to earth, simple and humble with great experience and expertise of around 30 years in childcare and development. World say God gives life through parents, but she has given several life to premature babies by treating them and taking care of them. She is a great at counseling and deep experience in child psychology. It's my great pleasure to invite her, Dr. Jayanti Murli. We are obliged that we are able to get your time, ma'am. Welcome to the
Wonderful.
Digital Designer
Wonderful.
Show.
Thank you so much, Shivam and Soumya and Pradeep as well. I am flattered to be asked, and thank you for that fantastic introduction. I'm glad to be here.
That's great, ma'am. Uh, Everyone has a story, ma'am. As we say always, this one. We want to know your journey till now, and how you got into, child. Because I feel there are two great things in this, most beautiful thing in this world. One is a child and one is a mother. These two beautiful things which are created by God. Because a woman, when she becomes a mother, irrespective of what maybe she tried to protect her child. And similarly, a child, either if it is a child of a, human, or it is of animal, or any child, even if it's a child of a bird, it's this is cute and so lovely to see them. So how was your journey till now? How you lived this life till now? And we want to listen from you, ma'am. Please.
Sure, absolutely. It is so true that the beauty, we are all born with the love for beauty, the love for justice, the love for truth. It doesn't have to be instilled in us. But as a child, I grew up as a middle child of three in the family, and I've had such a wonderful childhood. I grew up wanting nothing. Really, there was everything I was provided for. Looking back at my life, and it was due to the sacrifice of my parents, which I realize now. But at that time, life was just absolutely wonderful, and we moved quite a lot. Every 2 years, I was in a different school. I made a lot of friends. I would say in the Western world, that kind of movement is perceived as something that's given an unstable background for a child. But, like we are going to discuss just now, everything that you grew up as makes you who you are. So I find myself have no particular loyalty to a house. Any four walls and a roof will do. Wherever I am, I just set roots very quickly and make friends very quickly. And that might be due to the way I grew up. I never knew a different life, so I didn't know that, some people actually live in their house all their life, first 20, 30 years of their life, or even longer. I didn't know that as a child. And for me, it was an exciting adventure to make friends every time. So that was my childhood, and I really enjoyed it. And the longest, I would say, was my university days of 6 years, 5 years and an internship was the time up until my 24 years of life. That's the longest I've stayed in one city. So that also gave me much more deeper friendship. And since I moved here to UK, I've lived along different cities before I have settled down in one place now for about 10 years. And it's been a blessing of a life. And I've been married for 20 years. I have a daughter. And over a period of time, I've always been told I'm a bit more mature for my age at every age. But that was more emotional and abstract kind of maturity rather than intellectual part of it, which was on par with my age, I hope, So, and I separated from my husband about 10 years ago, and my daughter was then 15 years of age, in her teenage years. That experience in life gave me a lot more understanding of parenting. One begins to look very, very specifically at how a mother reacts, a father reacts, what it does to a child, and the school and whole lot. So I've had a lot of time to reflect, to go through and reflect and help others in similar situation, or even as a child when they are bringing up a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, as a family as well. So I've lived a very blessed life. Thank you.
Oh, that's really a wonderful journey till now, and as you said, the child upbringing matters a lot in one point, and that was very true. And we would love to know your experience and your knowledge based on this, so that the listeners can take it in their own life. My first thing will be, as you've been in 30 years by taking care of childs and understanding them, my first question will be why it is very important for every parents to understand and know about child psychology, and what are the drawback you see usually when parents ignore it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is when you think of a human as a baby, then it's born. If we look at it to say, when does the learning start? When do you become, how do you become the person that you are as an adult? The learning actually starts antenatal. Some people call it prenatal. When you're inside as a fetus, that's where the learning starts. And then perinatal, soon after you are born, when you are still very dependent, very much dependent for survival on your parents. And then there's different stages of childhood. So the formative years make you the person that you are. So a lot of us are not quite aware of it in some sense, how much the fetus can learn. Of course, we have seen in the spiritual world, as in Hindus and Christians, and I think Muslims as well, will also, there are lots of stories where a parent talks to the child in the womb and how that shapes the child's behavior. So not giving too much emphasis on that, but to know that the child can hear you and feel you as a fetus is important. And soon after, how you interact with the child, some of it is nature, some of it is nurture. And the one that we can have a handle on is nurture. And being aware that this experience is what deeply affects their future, both physical, cognitive, emotional, and social development. It involves all of this in the first 8 years of a child's life. How you interact with them, their everyday experience makes the person that they are. So it's a very privileged position for a parent or any carer who's looking after a child to be shaping that human being of the future. Sometimes when parents don't realize that, if they don't understand the child's behavior as an adult or as a teenager, they don't understand, they don't get it. I didn't raise you like this. We think like that, and where did that come from? Mom never did it, dad never did it, where did that come from? But if you actually analyze yourself later how your behavior was, even a 2-year-old, 3-year-old will understand the anger, will understand animosity, will understand. They may not express it, but they understand what's going on at home. And they adapt quickly to that, and they have no manipulation when they see it, and they learn from it. If we are not aware of it, then that's what we are making. So it is important for parents and anyone who is raising a child to know how every word they say, every act that is, every experience the child is given makes them the person in the future.
Correct. And I totally agree with you also, because when we went to like when we go for army interviews, officers interview and defense especially, there is a test which is known as psychological test, which happens, which is very tough type of test.
Yeah.
And it was actually designed by Britishers, long back before the independence. SSB, which psychology, TAT, thermal appreciation test, and picture perception test. These have been done, and once I found the interviewer and the psychologist said that the most of the psychological development, whether the guy will be courageous in his future time, or he will be, whether he will just back off in the hour of need from the battlefield. These all psychologies are actually engraved in very small age, from very small age. For example, if parents say that on a small thing, lie to your mom that, I was going out and I was late because of something else, this lying capability will be grown from the child age. Am I correct, ma'am?
Very, very true. People think that you teach them, I taught them right and wrong from the beginning. You might tell them lying is wrong, but if you lie, people kind of call off sick because they want to watch a match or something. And they don't think of it as a big deal. They talk about it in front of children saying, I've called in sick today so I can watch the match. Everybody's in the pub doing it. And that is a way of teaching your child. Most parents don't recognize it as that's what they're doing, but they can repeatedly tell till cows come home, don't lie, don't manipulate, don't do this, don't argue, respect. If you don't respect others, if they don't see you respect, then they won't. Just words are not enough.
Exactly, because action speaks more than words.
It does too. Yes.
It does too, yeah. So, ma'am, how children shape their own development, from childhood, and for example, if we take example of primary school student, what type of environment is best for learning for them? Is authoritative or emotionally supportive, and how it is different from a youth, and how the different phase of life, how a parenting should be done. You can tell with your own experience, own examples of your own life examples.
Sure, absolutely. The every experience the child goes through, it's like their brain is like a blank sheet when they are born. And from the moment they are born, we are making lines in it and making drawings in it. Some are beautiful, some are ugly, some are hurtful, some are not. So that's what we're doing. The brain is adapting, is learning every time. And the most of the learning and the behavior is done by the time they're 7 or 8 years of age. So that's in the primary school age. So every phase of life, they seem to be going through this. And when Neela, my daughter's name is Neela, and when we were together, we have Mom, her dad and I, and as a family, we've always been very social, and we found ourselves very easily. We make friends, and we will go the extra mile for our friendship anytime. So that's how she has been as well. But she's been an only child, and so socializing was important for her. But on the other hand, it became the norm for her. So I can remember one of the times when we were at on a weekend. So we were visiting somebody's birthday, and then we went to a park, and then we were on our way home. And she was very "Oh, Mom, do we have to go home?" And I said, "Yeah, we've had fun. We've had a wonderful day, haven't we? We did this, da, da, da." And then she went, "Well, I don't want to go home." I said, "What do you mean you don't want to go home?" I said, "Well, I just, can we go to somebody else's house? You've been to 3 different places already today, and it's time to go home." And she was like, "No," and she was whinging and moaning. I said, "Okay." I stopped the car and said, "Ask her to get out." She is about 5 years now. Asked her to get out of the car. And she was like, "Oh, why? Are you coming? Where? Whose house are we going?" "No, we are going to, we are not going anywhere. You are going. See, all those houses there are loads of children in that. So you can go knock on somebody's door and visit them, because I am tired now of having visiting anybody. Now it's time for us to sit and relax and be ourselves at our home." And she was like, "No, I don't want to do that." but so, okay, shall we go home? No, I don't want to do that. Then I said, okay, please get out of the car. And said, I'm not moving till you get out of the car. So she got out of the car. And I closed the door and she started crying on the pavement. And I was, it was very, very difficult as a parent for me to do that. I wasn't angry at her. I just wanted her to know there is a time for play, there is a time for quiet relaxation, and there is a time to be just us as family. I wasn't angry at her, but I needed to know that for her to learn, there is a place of safety that we go to after. So she was still crying when I pretended to move the car. And then she was crying loudly. So I stopped and I asked her to get back in, and then gave her the lecture. I've always given lectures, as in, time and again, different times, to understand what I'm trying to do, what she has to learn from that. And not as sit down in the next half an hour, but as a grown-up, she kind of like, okay, Amma, I understand. Before when I start giving a lecture, she'll say, okay, Amma, I get it. Because she knows then. Even now, she can remember that incident as an example of how discipline for me was important for her to know. Some people call it tough love. As in, you're tough in what decisions you're making. Your heart bleeds when you make the decision, but you know you're doing it for their good. And learning takes that amount. And for a school environment, if we go under there is sometimes we kind of, when we send the children to school, we think it's the teacher's responsibility. It's the everyone in the management responsibility to shape. But if you think about it, of their waking hours, they spend so much of their time. It's at school when they're in school age. So an hour before they go to school, and then when they come back, an hour and a half or something eating, and they're tired and they want to sleep. That's all the time they spend with us. The school environment is their learning experience now. So it is important, I feel, that the parents interact with the teachers quite closely. It is not okay, what happens at school happens at school. It's out of my control. It's not. You still have a supportive environment, as in when the child comes back and says, oh, the teacher said this or the teacher said that, you have to balance it to see whether that's right for your child or not. If you don't feel that, then you have to speak to the teacher to figure out what context that happened, and not fully take the teacher's word, not fully take the child's word for it, because it has to be in an environment of discipline. And that discipline, if we don't give the child, then it becomes really, really hard, as they don't have self-control. They don't have respect for either parent or any authority figures as an older child. And they don't even know what's appropriate or inappropriate behavior as a teenager, as an adult. And they become so selfish. In most children are selfish. That's the way we are all designed. And as they grow older and older, they kind of lose that selfishness and become self-aware. So we are the team, the teacher and us, helping that child in becoming that. You should know yourself. At the same time, you should know your position in the space around you, with the people around you. And all of that looks very theoretical for it to happen. But in practice, what do? Is with that, you have a handle on the situation. You don't kind of tell the teacher off in front of the child, and you don't kind of agree with the child and all the time. So you have to have a balance. And both mom and dad and the teacher, we all play a role. And we all have to work together. At home in these formative years, it could be that the mom and dad have slightly different views, and it's good. You have to complement each other. That's a good cop and the bad cop kind of example works. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the dad's the fun guy and mom's the, oh, have you done your homework person. But the only thing is, it has to be always changing. You can't always be the good one person be the good cop and always the other person be the bad cop. Then there is no balance. So when they know mom and dad don't contradict each other, then that's the strong foundation that you can give. You can't bounce one against the other. You can't manipulate one against the other, because we are a team. We are together as a family. And this is how it works. You may not like what mom says, you may not like what dad says, but you agree behind the child's environment. Whether I like it or not, we're going to do this for the child. Television time or iPod time or whatever that may be, play time or even choice of clothes, and which social event to go to. There's so many decisions to make. So working together, having a discipline, giving the love, but not ever letting go of the respect for the child. And the teachers works very well in the formative years.
Absolutely, ma'am. As you mentioned about the school life of a child and the things they were going through, and that time was a crucial time for a child. And personally, I have been in a dark place in that time of period, because I have been bullying in my school days. And personally, it was just so dark and devastating moment for a child, I can say that. And it's psychologically and physically and mentally it affects the child. So I just want to know from you, ma'am, how bullying or sexual harassment affects the psychology of a child, and how parents should react to that or take care of that child.
It's a very important subject and phase in child's life, and it also borders on how do we know the child is unhappy, as in either clinical depression or as some places that child doesn't want to go or doesn't want to talk about, because not all children are expressive of what they feel. I'm very sorry that you had to go through that kind of schooling, and it's not a unique experience. It's very common experience. It is up to us and the teachers to know and nurture the stage of strength in the child. Not every child is able to deal with it the way the parent would expect to. If the parent were an extrovert and a very strong personality, the child doesn't necessarily mean the child could be an introvert or a shy person or someone who is not as built-in, hardwired to be as courageous. So how do you provide that kind of place of safety in them, for them to be one with you, is firstly to know that such a thing is happening. And not every child will tell you outright. What we want to look out for is on an everyday basis to kind of talk to them. It may not happen every day, but 3 out of 7 days is good, to say what was it that made them really happy at school? What was it that made them really sad at school? Which one, people talk about, which is your favorite teacher? Yes, we do. But then we never go on to find out why that person is favorite or the person is not. So what you're looking for, so this should be a daily conversation for any child. But on the other hand, if you're thinking about the bullying that's happening or the unhappiness or any kind of abuse that is happening outside of your home, you are looking for signs when you have this everyday conversation where there is a subject they don't want to talk about, there is a person they don't want to talk about, or there is a change in behavior when you bring about that type of conversation. Those kind of things is what you're looking for. And it's not easy to have direct questioning to them to say, so why do you what happened? Tell me. That doesn't work. They might just go quiet. And you understand that they don't want to talk about it then, but then you bring about that conversation at a later time when they feel happy, when they feel settled, when you cuddle with them at night, you're either reading books or you're doing, I would normally do Bible verses with or a Bible story with my child, but you might be doing something similar. And that is the time when they feel so safe with you, is the time to bring up that conversation, to say, I see that you are not so happy with that. There is no secrets between mom and child, or dad and child for that case. There should be no secrets. If anyone asks you to keep a secret, you should tell them, no, between my parents and I, we don't have secrets. I'm sorry. If you want to tell me something, the chances are my parents will know. So that's how it works. There is no secret. And also, not only telling them, you have to tell them your secrets too. The things that happened in your school or something like that, something similar which you can relate to when you did something naughty at school, but you didn't want to tell your parents, but at some point you have to, because such a thing happened. Anything, relate your childhood experience or your other child's experience or your cousins, nieces, whatever, and say how good it is not to have that burden in your heart. And nothing bad will come out of talking about it. And even at that point, if they don't want to talk about it, you can still kind of say what will make it lesser of a difficulty for them. What can you do that can change, whether it is talking or taking out to a different school, or do you want to go to the same school as your brother, or something, what can you do that can make their life better? You can word it in a way depending on the age of the child in several different forms. So what is it that I can do to help you? Is keep it down to very, very basics, no leading questions, very open-ended questions. So it allows them to bring about and say, I wish I can box. That might be the answer. Why do you want to learn boxing? That's a very interesting thing. Do you want to get physically stronger? You can have the conversation in many different ways. So it is more exploring and us being open, and not giving the idea that you are going to home in on this person. Most children who are bullied or abused, the first thing they are afraid of is that this is going to come out in the open. If I told my parent, they are going to confront that person and make it all harder. That's what they worry about. So it is up to us to give that place of safety, to say, I won't do anything that is harmful for you, that will make your life harder. I want to make your life easier. I want to make your life happier. So it is more than saying it in words. That's what we need to show in action.
Absolutely, ma'am. Mm-hmm. So, as we are talking about parents, so my parents, after their marriage, 10 years of their marriage, I born, and it was like they have got something really precious in their life, and they were so protective of me, and I will say overprotective maybe. Because of that, in my childhood I was not allowed to play or go outside or roam around, so that eventually made me less confidence, and that less confidence totally destroyed me sometimes. And so should parents overprotective that child, or that overprotectiveness of the parents really affect the child mentality and
absolutely there's no two things about a child being overprotected. Can go either way. Sometimes it can be like you are saying, that you lose confidence because your parents have always had your back, and they've always sorted these things out, and now that you're out in the world, you find it harder. But on the other hand, it might also go that everything you want will happen, should happen. That's what it is. You can become overconfident and arrogant in your behavior. So there's lots of things that being either overprotective or neglect or ignorance can affect your child in the way that you rear. Definitely overprotectiveness comes from the background of love and affection, but it is still harmful for the child, even if it comes from where it comes from. So you could see, I was absolutely I couldn't believe my eyes when children who were obese in this country in UK, who were not just overweight but were obese, as in finding difficulty to walk in the primary school, that age. So they were at one point told that the parents shouldn't be giving them packed lunches. They should eat at the school dinners. And these parents created a lot of fuss, stood in the gates holding crisp packets and whatever, and burgers in their hand. Through the gates, they were trying to reach their child to give this to them because they believed these children are being starved. These children are not being kept happy. That's what they believed. And it was really mind-boggling to see how an adult can't see this. How can, leave alone a parent who closely liaises with the child. It's in the similar grounds with the emotional as well. This is physical. Everybody can see this child needs to actually eat healthy food and not unhealthy food, and do more physical activity to be to be happy with themselves, because those children can't play a physical activity that other children can do. So you can see that visually, and still the parents weren't getting it. And it's in that vein, if you look at it, the emotional behavior also, an overprotective parent, for whatever reasons. It may be an only child, it may be a child after many miscarriages or many years, or even an adoptive child after so long. So it is in parents' hands so much, parents as in carers who raise the child, in so much how we make this person in future a character, a behavior, it is an investment. We have to do good investment for it to reach the individual human being's own potential. It is just so important how we do that. And the overprotectiveness can be seen by other family clearly and actually been told off for it. But on the other hand, the parent themselves will not have any such insight into them. So as a husband, as a wife, as an aunt, as a niece, or anyone who sees this, it's up to us to tell them, this is what you feel. You're not telling them how to parent your child, but this is what you feel. So they begin to, all the time, they may not agree with you, but these things work on the mind and allow them to do that themselves.
Yes, agreed, ma'am.
I have one question here.
Mm-hmm.
1 minute. Who is that?
This is Pradeep here.
Oh my God. Here we have a surprise guy.
Yeah, I am always hovering around the digital designers.
Oh my God. Welcome, Pradeep.
Yeah. So I have a question here. Like, how can a parent identify their kids' talent and nurture them? Like, how can they equip themselves to first identify what their child is good at, and how can they go about identifying is the question.
It is watching them, spending time with them. That is the main. If you have it to say in one liner, that's what it is: spending time with them. It is, some parents get involved so much in their work so that they can make enough money to provide. But on the other hand, what they are depriving of is the interaction, the personal interaction with the child. So it is to be aware that your time with your child is a two-way thing. What you observe in a child is what going to help you help the child. So spending time with the child sometimes as an adult we have so many things going on. It's not easy with a 4 or 5 year old to repetitive play at that age is very, very high. They want to do the same thing over and over and over again, and you get tired after some time. So you have to learn to cope rather than learn to kind of say, oh, here's the TV or here's the Game Boy. You just play with those and then leave me alone. Let me go and finish this paper, do this thing, do that thing, so I can then get my promotion. So you're missing the boat of being with your child. We have to learn how to not get bored, but at the same time learn what is the child's gift and talents. If the child is very talkative, then we are going to explore the possibility of that, making those words much more sophisticated, much more clear in their thought process. So you are having a word play with them to encourage that. If someone is very involved in craft-like things, then all the children learn at school how to do cut this, stick this together and whatever. But when they are looking to do something as a perfection, then you learn it. My daughter Nila was very interested in drawing, and all children draw, and that's something you see all the time, and you see that as a passion. It could be, that's what I thought, it could be something she'll do on the side. But she continued to be, even in her maths homework, she would have done the homework and finished all the sums, but then she would have drawn line after each sum, and that one of those lines was a little bit crooked. So she decided to tear off all those pages, do all those sums again, and get the line between the sums in a very straight line. And that kind of completely threw me, looking at her thinking, who wants to work out those sums all again or even copy it? Just because it's like a 2 millimeters crooked, that line between the sums. It's got nothing to do with mathematics, but that's who she was. So when you see that this is a child who is a perfectionist, who has enough patience, who will take enough time to get that one thing correct. Never mind the whole concept of mathematics and getting the sums correct or not, but that's what she will do. So if I'm not sitting there with her, seeing how is she doing her homework, I'm not like sitting like a hawk and watching behind her back. I am having my own book to read or whatever, but any chatter going on, the banter between you and the child, all of that matters. With what little things that matter to your child, it may not matter to you. What matters to your child is what you're watching out for.
Wow, the reply was very apt. It stresses on the importance of how observative each of the parents should be, because first you noted that on the drawings she would be very on her sums she would make sure that the lines are straight, and to even see that you have to observe them, and you also mentioned that every child likes to draw, and when that every child likes to do versus a specific talent my child has, that distinction we can find it out only by observing. And also when she was erasing a whole page just to get the line straight, some parent might look at it as, oh, why is my child so obsessive? Or you could also look at it as, hey, there's a talent there. And that is where I think a lot of self-reflection and observation helps the parent to nurture the child. Very enlightening. Thank you. Shivam, I hand it over to you.
Absolutely, Pradeep.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And thanks for entering. You gave a surprise. And let me tell you guys, there is a secret, actually, Dr. Jayanti ma'am is actually the aunt of Pradeep, and it's a secret I would have not revealed, but
it's good to see him. It's good to have his interlude in between as a surprise. So I now know he's keeping an eye on me.
Thank you, Auntie.
Dora has something to ask.
Thank you, Pradeep, for asking about the special qualities of children. Personally, in my school days, I was a good artist and I used to paint a lot. Even I won a state level championship, but because I already told that I was a overprotective child, so my parents didn't give me the chance to pursue it. And then music happened to me. I was a guitarist, and I am a guitarist. I am learning every day. I'm a self-taught artist. I can say I nobody taught me art and nobody taught me music. But then, like I have done engineering. To be very honest, I never enjoyed engineering, and I just wanted to, flew out of that space and just go and do something that I love to do. And speaking of most of the Indian parents, they are more concerned about the marks and the rank holding. They always, like maximum parents, compare their children to others, and when they are scoring less mark, parents used to compare their children to other students who scored more marks. So I just want to know how that comparison of children's mentally and psychologically affect a child.
It is very true, and I grew up in that atmosphere as well, where ranking meant so much. And in UK schools, there is no ranking. It is you do get scores, you do have exams, but there is no comparison of ranking. You wouldn't get a comparison between students unless they want to do it themselves. There is no ranking as such in schools. There are plus and minus sides to it. It reminds me of a story of Chuck Swindoll, I think, where all the animals in the forest were having their own fun and they were doing their things. And then somebody thought, wouldn't it be great if an elephant thought, wouldn't it be great if I could also climb the tree like the monkey does? So they all decided to teach each other their skills. And many tired attempts at a duck learning to jump and like a rabbit, and they came back very, very tired at the end of a couple of days, and then decided that what they were doing was what they can do best, and none of the great swimming can be taught to another one who didn't have that talent. So obviously I am not saying it with a punchline, but you get the gist. And it is individually we are all different in some ways, as in what our talents are. And if our parents don't recognize that, and even when they do, in a system where in Indian system particularly, where there is so much competition, where getting 90% is not enough, getting 95% is not enough, you have to get 98 point something percent to be even selected for the professional education, where there is so much competition. It is a plus and a minus, and it is more how we deal with the system than saying that system is rubbish. The system is required because if you have 1,000 people who are qualified and you have only 200 seats to give, there has to be some way of comparing and doing it. So we have a higher population, and there is a system in place which is not immediately going to change. So a system change is necessary, don't misunderstand me, but that is not in individual parents' hand. What we can do while we are in the system as we are, so that we can enable the child to be the person who might change the system after all. We don't know that. So we are pushing each child to achieve their own maximum potential. That's what we need to look at. In the formative years, we are focusing on them being strong, them being understanding of each other, where their place is, them being confident, and them as a human being, we are character building. And in the later years, roughly around teenage years, in the upper school ages, we are building them to be in the society and to deal with what we have now. Okay, you are fantastic at science, you are rubbish at art, you are rubbish at languages. But if you want to become whatever, a lawyer or a professional course, your score has to reflect all that. So you don't put the burden on them, but you work with them. So how can I help you achieve a better score in the areas that you're weak on? I don't have to focus on science. You're fantastic at it already. So it is a continuing interaction with your child and continuing to see them as equal. So if you were put in that situation, how can you make that happen? You can't. So you can't expect your child to absolutely be fantastic at everything. But there is a requirement to meet that target. So how can we work at it from now on? That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, India, although it's not the same as I grew up, I am 56 now, so my childhood years are long gone. And it has changed so much. It has given so much more opportunities. It is up to the parent again to see that there are more opportunities now than there were children. So it is not, professional education is not the only end all of everything. They can still shine so much in learning this. Well, so there are a lot of homework they have to do to see, once they've identified their child's talents in certain aspects. So yeah, okay, you can do music, but can you make money out of it? Is their question. Okay, you're good at music. Can you make money out of it? Do other people make money out of it? No. How could you, if they don't see their child as great, then that child is not going to perceive themselves as great at their potential. So when you identify the potential, you have to do the homework as a parent to see how can I promote my child to have a living, make a living in this society, and at the same time not let go of the God-given talent. How can that satisfy both ends? So it is much harder in a creative world to make money, within quotations, not for a luxurious living, for an everyday living. It is hard. So it's very difficult from a parent perspective to see. I had the same difficulty with Nila because she was into drawings, and that was what she was great at. But I believed that you have to have science to understand the world, not necessarily become a doctor. Like I am a doctor, her dad's a doctor. I did not ever want her to be the doctor. I knew from about she was 10, 11 that she's not going to, we can make it in such a way, put tuitions in place, whatever. Yes, she can qualify. Yes, she can go through medical school. She will be a mediocre doctor, but she will be a fantastic in the field of creation. She's got so much. Medicine, unfortunately, is not creation. It's not about creating new. It's about healing, bringing it back to what it was. That's what it is. She had compassion. She had other qualities that's required to be a doctor, but that wasn't her best thing. I want her to shine in the field that she would. And that's a field completely unknown to me. I took a year when she was still in year 11 to figure out what are the things that she can do to use her talent of drawing with her hands, and will it be architecture? Will it be this? Will it be that? Will it make her, so many things in there. So I had to do a year of research to figure out she's not going to shine in the Game Boy business, games, those visual ones. And because she is not inclined for cutthroat competition, she is a happy-go-lucky person. She will not fight her way through that. And again, in the medical field, yes, she will make a mediocre doctor, but she will not be happy in that. So I have to figure out what she can do, which will make her happy as well as make her a living. She is now an animator. She is so good at her job. She's only 25. She's in a second level promotion already. It was not easy to make that decision, to allow her to do what she wanted to do and encourage her in that, in a field that I had no clue on. It was very, very hard going through that. There was uncertainty in myself, thinking, am I doing the right thing for her? That is always there. But you just keep on at it. And at one point she told me, Mom, they are paying me to do the thing that I love. I can't believe it. That was her first salary. And that's what she said. So, it is to achieve that is a hard journey for a parent, but that's the job description.
Exactly. And I really liked one point when you said that whatever you do, whatever you love, you do. But point of time, parents will ask whether you can earn from it or not. Mm-hmm. And the second thing, when you said that may not be the science, is not required for the creation, whatever, you thought Neela was doing, but that is required. That is a basic thing which is required. And to be at par of it, you're not going to be the expert in it. You're not going to be best out of it. Doesn't matter, but you have to be at a certain level. And really, I really like that point. I wanted to ask one very basic question, which was like when we see our parents, like child is growing up, and every among them, everyone have some bad habits. The habits like, drinking, smoking. I'm just stating few. And there might be a lot of bad habits, which few parents try to, keep it within themselves. But since you are staying in a, boundary, in a limited boundary, still they will see a drinking. They might think it is a Coca-Cola drinking, or they might think as something else. Smoking. If my parents are doing, because parents are role model for the children when they are growing up. So if parents are doing, that means it's a good thing. So how to protect child from any, bad things been done by parent? Like, for example, if father is drinking, so how a mother can take care so that, she can protect her child? Especially for those persons, this question is for where one side of the part is not well aware of it, but the other side of part want to take care of the child in a best manner.
Yes, that is very important. I think in this day and age, it is very hard to get two people thinking the same or working towards the same goal. In some sense, the ego comes in between, if not the addiction to one or the other. So it is no easy task. I tell you the outright, there is no easy solution, but there are some basic things that we can do. If you think about it, the person is addicted or to either alcohol, smoking, whatever, the gambling, whatever that might be, is because of their own childhood also. They have grown to be dependent on something else outside of them. So it is not that they are willingly doing this. If you go deeper into their heart to ask, will they be actually not want to be reliant on an external substance? Yes, nobody wants to be. They get into it without realizing, and then they are in it, and it takes a lot of willpower to get out of it. And one of those willpower, the stimulation indication could be that you don't want your child in the same position. So an overwhelming love and respect you have for your child can be a motivator for you to change from the way you are. And the other part of the question that you were asking, how do you balance it when there is no balance, when mom and dad don't see eye to eye on something? It could be anything. It could be child rearing, or it could be this addiction or the habit or the behavior. How do you balance it? Is the one with the more sense, if you like, it becomes their responsibility to not shield the child as such, but to explain the behavior. And you only then hope for the best, to explain the behavior of the parent, why they are how they are, and to not to disrespect. Because a person wholly is not defined by one behavior or one character. It's not. It is, like Mahatma Gandhi said, you hate the sin, but not the sinner. That has to come in. So it is a bad habit doesn't make your dad or mom a bad person. The habit is the bad thing. The addiction is the bad thing. The swearing is the bad thing, but doesn't make that person. It is a very hard thing to do, even as an adult, between adults, to understand that is not easy. But it is the way it is. So it is a difficult task when the two sides of the bullock cart, the two bulls don't pull along the same weight. It becomes harder. It is a roller coaster ride. But what you could do is to explain it to the child. How are you dealing with it? How is the mom dealing with the drunkard or an alcoholic husband? How is the dad dealing with the shopaholic wife? For to be contemporary here, how are they dealing with it? So explaining that to them, that it can be hard on the other person when you do this, when you don't do this, or whatever. Because this is all we are talking about as a in the teenage years, maybe in the secondary school age. That's when we're talking about. Even at university, it can be something that you can talk to a child. But in the formative years, these things are. Children have this protective glaze around them where they are so self-focused. As long as they can get their own little toy and do whatever, they wouldn't see this as a life-changing thing. Having a deep and meaningful conversation won't work under the age of 8. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there comes the part, like, if you have, any example which, like, you might have insisted to someone and they've tried it, and or like, your real life example or somewhere where you face, particularly when, the one of the parents was, or, I'm not only saying the bad thing as only, smoking, drinking, but also some parents use curse words, which are very, harsh and bad in front of a child. And sometimes what happens, the childs are very small, they start using it when they get angry, and, or, they're small because they don't know about it. So in your real life experience, have you, like, ever gone through, like, have you insisted someone or guided someone which really helped? Because, yeah.
It is in that sense, it's a hard thing. This is where the saying about the habit is wrong doesn't make the person wrong comes into play. And in my personal experience, it would be not quite a habit, but my husband cheated on my relationship, and that's why we got divorced. And it was very hard for a teenager to, she was 15, but she was a young 15, as in a mental age would have been much younger, as in India, not as growing up here as a child. The child has to remain a child as long in their childhood years is one of the things that I have learned. You don't treat them as adults from young onwards. No, you treat them as a child. So you always have this ability to talk to them, to say what you say carries more weight than what they think or what they say. Never mind, they think of themselves as, oh, I'm a big boy now, I'm a big girl now. That doesn't matter. When someone, as a young child, when they say, as a 6 or 7 year old, when they say, when a parent tells me that, oh, she won't let us watch when she's awake, we have to watch only this after she goes to sleep or he goes to sleep. He won't let us do this, he won't let us do that. And I'm kind of taking my time to talk to them, saying there is no he or she won't let you. You are the adult in this relationship. You are the one who should be letting them. It is all very convenient when they sit 2 hours, 3 hours together in front of telly for you, so you can get on with your cooking or with your phone, talking to friends or whatever. But then when you come back to wanting to discipline them, it won't work, because you haven't started with where you should. So there is no child letting you do this. That doesn't happen. So in that same vein, if you're talking about, there was this parent who was asking me about this dad. Always, whenever he is looking after the child, is always letting them watch this and this. So when I say this, he won't listen, or he behaves with me this way, and the child behaves with him that way, and I don't know how to match the two. So in those circumstances, again, you are the adult. You are the one who's setting boundaries and whatever. So even at the time, if they don't seem to listen, your children, what you repetitively say matters. what you repeatedly say, even when you're disciplining them, when you're putting them to bed or whatever, you have to insist and say it out loud that you love your child. The child is worthwhile, the child is great, has a great potential. Those things you insist on. Even like half an hour ago, you might have shouted at the child for something else, or told them off for doing or whatever. And it doesn't matter. That is for that behavior. And now you are the mom and the child, or the dad and the child. So you have to be always letting them know that you are looking out for them. Even when they're not asking, you are actually giving them some extra privilege, saying that, oh, you asked me 2 days ago, I want you to have it now. And they know, because that's how they know. They have to have in their heart that my dad or my mom will look after me. No matter they're shouting now, or they don't like what I'm doing now, or they're crying over something now, it doesn't matter. But they always have my interest in their heart. There are some people who want more for me than I want more for myself. Even more than myself. My mom wants this, my dad wants this. When there is then there is disconnect between the mom and dad, the more sensible person carries more responsibility to still continue to instill the good things in them, to say how swearing is wrong, is not right. Only people who don't have more vocabulary can continue to use this effing word all the time because they can't find another adjective in their brain. So that doesn't make your dad a bad person, but that's how he was brought up in the childhood. He can't do anything about it now. He can try, but you are a different person. You can be a different person when you're grown up. That's how we deal with it.
Great. Then, ma'am, like this may be you had so many 30 years of experience. Can you tell one great moment when because you have been working with childs and child, and I love children. Any one experience, you loved that experience when you met a baby or you saved someone? Just your point of view, when in this whole 30 years, one moment, it's very difficult to find, but if you can gather, oh my God, this was a wonderful experience.
There are several moments. It's difficult to choose because I feel so privileged to be in a position where I can have a third person objective. So there was one time a friend of mine who told me when I was liaising with Nila for something, she was asking me something, and then I was telling her, what part of no do you not understand? Sit down and tell me, what do you not understand about it? And I went on, and I can't remember the exact incident. And this mother who then had a 2-year-old told me several years later that that kind of gave her how to deal with the unruly child without getting angry. And she said that moment changed the way she started parenting with her own child. And I was, that happened? I couldn't remember. I only remember her saying it to me. I couldn't remember. So she was overwhelmed with the way she saw me and Nila react in that manner, that I can say this. What I said it to her without being angry, in a very calm manner, and really looking like I want to understand what part of no that she doesn't understand. Of course, it didn't feel like that inside, I'm sure, but that's how it came across, and she thought that was a life-changing parenting moment for her.
That's so sweet. So we'll that's really sweet, and we'll come to the last point and the most favorite portion of our after the intro was your message to parents, youth, hustler, anyone. It might not be only for child psychology, but anything. Your message, what you have learned in this time span of 56 years. Your message to the listeners.
Wow, that's a great responsibility. Each of us have so much to give. And it is such a privilege to be able to influence another human being. And that's what you get when you're rearing a child is that you have that opportunity to make that one bit of the world in 20 years' time is in your hands, not in politicians, not in your parents, not in the money that you provide. It's in your love and affection. Bottom line is love. Everything should be based on love. That's my mantra.
Wow. And we really learned a lot of things, like, from the first, if you say the door closing, the car door closing when when your daughter wanted to go to meet more people, but you said where you actually don't want it to hurt, or you're not angry, but you want to instill the discipline that everything has a time. And the acting of parents as a good cop and a bad cop, which was really a very great example. Like, not everyone can be, one guy can be only a bad cop, but it has to be mixture. It should be a balance. And another very great point, like, when even you are supporting your child, so love is great, but don't let go the respect, because if respect is gone, it will actually decrease the priority in the children. Like, they will not respect you, so they won't come to you for the problems also. Then to know your child, because on a daily basis, because child are same like animals, they don't speak much. They are not like, this cannot understand animals' words. Similarly, we cannot understand small child words. They let him. So we have to speak to them. We have to observe them. Basic talking we have to do. Ask silly questions like, favorite teachers, all that. That was a really nice point you gave. The daily conversation. And the parents should not do overprotectiveness, but the education system cannot be. So these are really a nice point, and one point I really loved was repeatedly saying them that how much you love them, so that because it actually becomes a habit when you do something repeatedly. And it was really great experience to know so many good points from you, ma'am. Like, I am overwhelmed with it. It's so amazing experience for us to learn so much great thing. You want to say something, please?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I have tried my best to stay away from my doctor point of view. And I think I've succeeded in that. There's so much physiology that you can talk about. But on the other hand, it has been such a pleasure to share what I have to share. And like you said, if any one person is influenced by this in the right direction, I am just absolutely grateful. My heart is full of gratefulness. Thank you.
So guys, hope you love this show. Next time we'll again meet with a new hot guest with new experiences and new stories. We always love your support that inspire us to come up with new stories every time. We also believe that everyone have a story in their life worth learning from them, life worth emotional to weep on them, life worth growing with them, and life with knowledge sharing from them. If you have a similar story, please reach out to us in our Instagram page and become a part of our family, because every story matters for us every time, because we love you guys. Thank you so much.